let's just talk about this. With just days to go before Governor Phil Murphy unveils his eighth and final budget proposal, tensions are rising in Trenton. Senate Republicans are drawing a line in the sand, threatening legal action if income tax revenue is once again used for what they call pork barrel spending. Now, in a sharply worded letter to the governor, they argue the state constitution mandates these funds be used exclusively for property tax relief based on a clear formula, not political favoritism. We're being joined now by New Jersey State Senator Declan O'Scanlon on the phone to unpack this escalating showdown. Senator, I know you're not feeling 100%, so I can't thank you enough for getting up early in the morning and being with us. Welcome.
It's not a problem at all. It's part of the job. And look, I'm just battling the cold that everyone else is. So, and I think I'm on the tail end of it. But it's brutal out there, and I think every one of us has had something this season. So. But happy to be on with you. These are important issues.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it sure is important. Let's start with the heart of the issue. Your letter says that Governor Murphy has violated the New Jersey Constitution by diverting income tax revenue to special projects instead of property tax relief. And we're so overtaxed in the state to begin with. So can you explain what specific actions in this past budget, if you will, led you to this point?
Well, the practice of diverting money from the Property Tax Relief Fund, which was, according to our Constitution, was created to make sure that income tax revenue in New Jersey wasn't squandered or wasn't just manipulated or given to the powerful and the and the connected. And it clearly laid out that the money collected had to be distributed based on a formula, which implies that everyone or every municipality or every school would have the ability to compete for the money on an even playing field. That hasn't happened, and the misuse and diversion away from formula aid has exploded in the last few years. The governor included in his budget last year, right out of the gate, $100 million of diverted funds. The legislature doubled down, and the ending budget ended up with over $300 million of it. That's got to stop. It is expanded dramatically under this governor and legislative leadership.
So now, in that you talked about certain things that crossed the line in the budget that led to that. What are some of those expenses, if you will, that led to that specifically, and why doesn't it fit the Constitution?
We've outlined hundreds of millions in pork, and really, if you look at even other categories that aren't diverted funds, you're north of $1 billion in pork in every budget in the last few years. That is a crazy number, and it's completely unsustainable. But look, it's a French Arts Museum here. It's a luxury sports stadium that costs hundreds of millions of dollars there, and all of these things are tied to some of the most powerful legislators out there. I get that when you're the majority, there's some power that comes with that, but it doesn't allow you to abuse and violate the Constitution and divert these monies without a second thought. That cannot continue to happen.
Yeah, and the governor's office is, of course, pushing back, saying the budget structure is in line with what both Democratic and Republican governors have done for decades. So how do you respond to that defense, and what makes this administration's approach different in your view?
Much worse. And you did see an occasional, pretty small number here and there in previous governors' budgets. It's exploded under this administration, and certainly with other money, all the other categories of pork have exploded to north of $1 billion. This hasn't happened in decades. It's a big number, and certainly just the diversions from the Property Tax Relief Fund that we've identified, over $300 million. That's a huge increase from previous administrations.
That is something. And your letter threatens litigation if the pattern continues in the upcoming budget. So what would that lawsuit look like, and who would you represent, and what kind of outcomes are you hoping to achieve from that?
We would work to put together a number of the aggrieved entities, school systems, municipalities. You see hundreds of millions of dollars that are given out based on no formula whatsoever, based simply on the powerful and the connected. You see us adhering to, and this is outside the issue we're talking about right now, but it's still significant. You see the school funding formula. It's over 20 years old. That's a disaster. I mean, it was outdated 10 years ago, and we're still slavishly following it, doling out billions of increased dollars in aid to schools that the governor brags about to a very few select school systems, leaving hundreds of other districts. We have too many, but we have 600 school districts under around half of them haven't kept up with inflation with their aid, and more than 100 have actually had it slashed, and they're hurting. They're canceling extracurricular activities. They're increasing class sizes. They're a mess. Several of them are probably close to bankruptcy. It really is a disaster, and this administration has done nothing to fix that. We could have done all of that, reworked the school funding formula, and probably slashed $1 billion, $1.5 billion of our structural deficit, which is over $4 billion. It's a mess. It's a ticking time bomb, and we'll probably see more of it tomorrow when the governor announces his budget with a rosy smile on his face. We'll be here to tell the truth about it.
Senator, you talked about that formula again, and tax relief is supposed to come, a property tax relief through a formula. But you're saying that it's sort of eroded over time. So why do you think the requirement has been ignored for so long, and why enforce it now? Are you just worried that it's just going to keep sliding away to the point that it'll be totally irrelevant?
Well, let me reiterate it. It was not a slow and gradual increase. It dramatically increased under this administration. There were, minor questionable sidesteps of the formula in the past, but this administration ballooned that. Again, last year in the governor's budget, he specifically called for $100 million, over $100 million of abuses of that formula requirement. So it's increased dramatically over just the past few years. So that's why it's time now to step up and push back. So just to be clear on that, there's if you don't use a formula as the Constitution requires, and abide by the spirit of the law and the intent that called for adding in the Constitution that you need a formula and you should dole this money out according to a formula, you really will start to erode faith in government across the board, from taxpayers and from the people operating our municipalities and our schools. Exactly. Why have it all?
Right. That makes sense. And if one person can deviate from it, then the next one will use that as the excuse to keep deviating. And then there's no point. Just like the Constitution itself, the federal and the state Constitution. Liberals love to just say that liberals look at the United States Constitution as just an obstacle that should be avoided. It's like, no, this is the foundation of our country. This is the policy with which we rule our country. And the whole point is to have minimal government interference. We're supposed to be free. That's the whole point. They forget, or they conveniently don't want to acknowledge that the Constitution is supposed to limit government from us. It's not supposed to tell us how we have to live our lives. But that's the difference between liberals and conservatives. Right. Finally, if you had the governor in front of you right now, and you had your hands tied behind your back, of course, what would your message be to him as I'm kidding, as he finalizes his proposal, and what would you be watching for when he unveils that proposal?
Well, the overarching budget deficit of over $4 billion is stunning, and it's a real ticking time bomb. So the very first thing I would say to the governor is, what are you doing to address this? And are you going to finally accept we Republicans in the Senate and the Assembly have for years, in particular, I'll give credit to the Senate, come up with comprehensive alternatives that would get this spending train in order and really put New Jersey on a sound fiscal footing going forward. That has not happened. Between the governor's office and the Democrat legislative leadership, we've created this ticking time bomb of over $4 billion, approaching $4.5 billion structural deficit. And are we going to finally start to get that under control? Now, look, unfortunately, some things were completely squandered, some potential options that could have saved billions of dollars that don't exist anymore. For instance, reworking the school funding formula before fully implementing it. The governor brags about that, and that is one of his biggest mistakes. we should rework the school funding formula rather than fully implementing it, because we just don't have that option anymore. So it's going to make it much harder on the next governor, whoever she may be, on either side of the aisle, to fix this mess. I would be, getting back to your question, my answer to that would be, Governor, are you going to finally start to go in the other direction in your last year's budget and begin even incrementally to set us up for success rather than failure? I highly doubt the answer to that would be yes.
Yeah, I am amazed, and I scratch my head looking at all these liberal-run states that received tens of billions of dollars during the pandemic, and all of that money just got squandered. It all just disappeared. A lot of people's pockets got lined, as you knew would be the case, as conservatives said would be the case, and they denied it. All that money, and of course the hundreds of billions, nearly $1 trillion that was supposed to eliminate our inflation, the Inflation Reduction Act, which was nothing more than a big leftist squandering, money laundering scheme, clearly. And finally, of course, that's just my little opinion. Senator, property taxes, of course, and this I will let you go with, so you can go rest your voice. Property taxes are, of course, the perennial issue in New Jersey. And by the way, I live part-time here and part-time in Florida. Our property taxes in Florida nowhere near what they are here. No income taxes in Florida, yet they still have all the services that we have in New Jersey. So somehow they're able to, oh, by the way, and the schools have better outcomes and better graduation rates now in Florida than in New Jersey for less money. And there are plenty of minorities and plenty of people who speak different languages. So we don't have an excuse here for the lack of performance in New Jersey anymore. If you succeed in redirecting the funds, how do you see that making a real difference for taxpayers?
Well, you're right. The overarching theme here is that, and it's kind of a mantra of Democrats in blue states. Oh, well, and as the governor said, if taxes are issued, maybe this isn't your state. They claim that we have better services. They claim we have better outcomes in education and other things. And that is absolutely never has been true, but it's even less true today than it was 7 years ago when the governor took office. And you're absolutely right about the federal dollars. The Inflation Reduction Act was the exact opposite. It actually increased inflation. And much of that money was squandered. But even bigger here, especially in New Jersey, the opportunity was squandered. We could use the breathing room of that federal money to fix our budget, to fix our structural deficit, and we completely squandered it. Because here we are with over almost $4.5 billion structural deficit, and it's a shame, and it will never happen again. That federal largesse, it's impossible for it to happen again because the federal government is now deeply, deeply in debt. The opportunity to rework our school funding formula, all of that are squandered opportunities. I've said the Murphy administration is going to be known as the administration of squandered opportunities. Mark my words, that is going to be exactly true.
And it's amazing because he comes from such a business background. You would think he could run the state like a business, but clearly that's not the case because he wants to take care of his left-wing friends. New Jersey State Senator Declan O'Scanlon, thank you for joining us. Well, go ahead. Sorry, say that again.
No, you're absolutely right. The absolute truth. And thank you very much for having me. Give me the opportunity to weigh in.
Please, when you're feeling better, we'll have you on video. We'd love to have you on. In spite of your being under the weather, you were amazing and gave us 15 minutes of your time. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. But come back when you're feeling well. We'd love to have you on even longer.
Well, I would make the argument that your viewers and everyone is better off not having to look at me, but happy to come on when feeling better. And
that is not true. You're a good-looking man. You're a good-looking man. We appreciate your time, sir. Feel better and have a wonderful morning. I appreciate you today. Thank you.
Thanks. You too.